It's great to see the eighth annual ReelOzInd film event is happening on October 19th in Melbourne and also in Yogyakarta. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the festival director of ReelOzInd, Jemma Purdey. Jemma, welcome again to Movie Metropolis.
Well, thank you, Peter, so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Always good to talk to you. And again, as we do each year, I suppose, to remind people, just talk about the concept behind ReelOzInd.
Yeah, well, as you just mentioned, it's 8 years now that we've been having this festival of short films. And the festival is actually a competition that we then create into a festival that then travels around both countries. So it's an open competition where we have submissions from Indonesian and Australian-based filmmakers. They can submit films from all different genres, documentary, fiction, animation, and we have a young filmmaker category. And then we have a panel of judges who select the best ones, and then we collect them together and we create this really fabulous, unique, bilingual, binational festival of Indonesian and Australian short films. And as you know, we've been premiering our festival every year at ACME in Melbourne, but also in Indonesia on the same day. We also have the Indonesian premiere, which has happened in different cities. This year it's in Yogyakarta, which is fabulous because I think our very first one was in Jogja, and it's a real cultural heartland for Indonesians. So then our festival is, again, a very unique format, which is a pop-up format. So we are very open and encouraging of any community, organization, small group, school, whoever, to join with us, partner with us, and to host their own little pop-up festival wherever they like, wherever they are. The idea behind it, Peter, is, from 8 years ago when we kind of sat down and we were trying to imagine ways that we could connect Australians and Indonesians better. And we just saw that there was a real gap in our, the way we share our stories, in particular, our visual stories with each other, even though, we're such close neighbors. And many of us have visited Indonesia, and increasingly Indonesians are also visiting Australia. They're students here. They come here for holidays. But something's missing there. So we see it in the cinemas. Australian films are not shown on Indonesian screens. And the same here in Australia. We very rarely get to see Indonesian films. So we thought this would be, a fun way. It would also reach out to younger film goers, but also people who, are a little bit nervous about, connecting with, foreign film. And so this is a quite easy format for that, we find, kind of digestible short film format, which introduces our audiences to, films from another place. And 8 years in, we're still going, and it's such a unique and fun experience for our audiences, and also for us, the privileged people who get to put it together.
It's a great experience, and it's interesting to note that films have to be no longer than 10 minutes, and that they're obviously by Australian and by Indonesian filmmakers, and that they are all subtitled. You must have received quite a few submissions this year.
We had our highest ever number of submissions, and that's really just so fabulous because, COVID made everything upside down, and we were not sure, how we would survive through that. As you would know, and some of your listeners might know, we kept going through COVID, and we had our festival online only, which was not too difficult for us actually to do. But obviously we lacked, that incredible experience of getting together to watch the films. But we've rebounded, and we had, as I say, the highest number of submissions, close to 300, which is a record for us. And what's really great, Peter, is that the number of Australian submissions was really high this year. Look, Indonesia's a large country, like 10 times the size of Australia. So that's to be expected, that they were always, for us, the highest number of entries came from Indonesia. And in a way that was partly because we had really good networks in Indonesia and a strong kind of support base there. So getting kind of to Aussie filmmakers and convincing them that, it's a bit different, this platform, but it's, actually really great. And I think that message has, really been heard. So lots of great emerging Australian filmmakers, more films submitted by film students from the big film and television schools in Australia. So that for me is a real bonus this year. But yeah, across the board, just more films means, generally you're going to get a better quality, aren't you, at the end of the day. But yeah, so we had great pleasure in watching so many. But yeah, so it was a really, really good turnout.
Oh, excellent. And I notice you have quite a diverse judging panel, including Riri Reza, who I've spoken to in the past, and Richard Frankland as examples. So how do you select your judges?
Yeah, well, Riri, for example, you might remember Riri was one of our inaugural judges. So again, this was kind of when we launched ReelOzInd, we said, how can we do it to make an impact from the beginning? And so we were very lucky, and we were able to connect to Riri and his filmmaking partner, Mira Lesmana, at the time. And they were both inaugural judges for us. So this year I went back to Riri, and, he's just so generous, such a busy, successful, influential filmmaker in Indonesia. And he was happy to come back and do it. This is the thing, the generosity of people, creative people, as you know, to participate in these kinds of things is always overwhelming sometimes. Richard, again, has a connection to the Australian Indonesian Centre, which is where ReelOzInd is, based. We worked with Richard in the centre on making a documentary a few years ago now, before COVID, where we followed some Indigenous painters. Actually, they were all artists from Arnhem Land who had a trip to Makassar in Indonesia, in South Sulawesi. There's a long history of a trading history, really intimate history between the peoples of Makassar and Northern Australia. And so they made this beautiful documentary about that. It's been screened on SBS, and Richard was main protagonist in that film. So yeah, it was very easy to reach out to him. Again, he makes films, he's a musician, he's just all over creative person. But I also, this year I'm very aware too that, social media and the power of that platform, YouTube, and all those things being used more and more and in really creative ways to connect. And, the content that's being created is of high quality. So we have a few jury members from Australia and Indonesia who, that's what they do. So they're content creators, I guess, but, I see them as creators of short films too. That's what they do. So yeah, some exciting new kinds of avenues that we can reach out to through those people too. But yeah, overall, when I think about it, I just think like, who's out there that's creative, that's interested, that's engaged, and no one ever says no to me. So I'm very, very lucky in that regard. So we have musicians, we have writers, not just film people. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. It's good, diverse panel. Now, let's talk about October 19th at Acme at 6:30. And I need to declare an interest that, again, Jemma, you've asked me to host the Q&A. I always enjoy doing that. So let's talk about what will happen on the night, because I gather a number of the award winners will be there.
Yes, yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, again, we have the Australian premiere and we have the Indonesian premiere, and because we're not an incredibly highly funded festival, unfortunately I can't bring our Indonesian filmmakers to Australia or take our Australians to Indonesia, but we try to gather people where they are. So this year, yes, I'm really excited. There will be some filmmakers, some of our awardees will be arriving and getting the whole treatment and speaking with you on the Q&A panel. This year winners from Australia come from all over Australia. So people from Perth and New South Wales, also here in Victoria. So yeah, we'll be talking with them. So or the audience, get to see our award-winning films. So this is the films judged best in their categories. So for documentary, for animation, for fiction, and our young filmmaker. And as well as that, we have films that have received special mention. So the package, as you might recall, we have about 10, 11 films, maximum 10 minutes. And some really outstanding animation again this year. It's always of incredibly high quality, from both Australians and Indonesians. It's really something I've seen evolve over the years. Also, I mean, the Indonesian film, as you would know, is there's a richness there in terms of the aesthetic, in the way they make films. And I've seen this growth too in the storytelling, like the way that the narrative is treated in Indonesian films. So some really good things there. And always we have powerful documentaries, so look out for that. So our theme this year is pencarian, or it means quest. It was one of those ones where how can we get the right word in Indonesian to match the English and vice versa? It's about, self-exploration, but it's about going out into the world and seeking something. And it's a good theme, I think, because it's broad enough, but it brings out, which I always love with ReelOzInd, these very universal themes, that we can all relate to.
Yes, excellent. And Quest, that's a nice title, if you like, for the theme of the festival. And we should mention, of course, all the films. The Australian films are subtitled in Indonesian and vice versa, Indonesian films subtitled in English.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, really important that we've always done that. And we assist with that process, especially for the Australian side. They often have difficulty finding subtitling, but that's okay. And, it's, I know in the past, Australian filmmakers, they're just so chuffed. They just wow, my film represented in, another language and being shown in Indonesia is, it means a lot. So we're very proud of that bilingual, as I said, binational kind of framing for our festival.
Excellent stuff. So if people want to book for the evening and get more information, I suppose ReelOzInd.com is the best place to go.
Yeah, that's sure. But just Google ReelOzInd and Acme, and you'll probably get the Acme page. So people can just book the tickets, which are free. This is a free event.
Right.
How great's that? Through the Acme page. So that'd be an easy step. Just Google it. But we're open. Hopefully everyone can come. It's a Thursday night. I've heard that Thursdays are the new Fridays, so that's the way
I like that. Yes, so Thursday, October 19th at Acme at 6:30. Excellent stuff, Jemma. And I will ask you, I think I'm going to ask you the last question. Have you seen any other films of late that have impressed you?
Oh, gosh. So many. I mean, okay, I can always say Barbie, but I know you've talked about Barbie with other people, I'm sure. So I'll just leave that to the side. But I loved it on so many levels. But the Indonesian films, which we really should focus on, I'll just say that, by the way, October in Australia is turning out to be this fabulous all over experience of Indonesian film. I don't know if you've noticed, but the Adelaide Film Festival, which is coinciding pretty much with our festival, is having a spotlight on Indonesia as a country this year. Which, happens very infrequently and needs some kind of financial backing, but they have it this year. So they're screening 6 feature films from Indonesia, a really exciting program. And at the same time, over in Sydney, we have the South by Southwest Sydney Festival around the same time in a few weeks in October. There's at least one short film that I know of that's a really great kind of international festival film that's screening there, and also a feature film which has been at festivals and is having its Australian premiere. And what is the name? I will get it. It is, by the filmmaker Regas Banu Teja, who you might know of. And the film is called Budi Pekerti. So big things happening in Indonesian film in Australia, which, you know, as someone who's observed it for a long time, and you too, Peter, like it's on and off, and not consistent enough. This year, wonderfully, MIF had a couple of films, Indonesian films, or at least with Indonesian input. And I managed to get to see Autobiography, which I'm sure you saw. Did you see? No?
No.
Maybe not. Right. Yeah. Fabulous film. Also, I think, you know, was at Venice last year and has had a lot of acclaim by a first-time filmmaker called Makbul Mubarak. He's actually a film critic who's kind of turned into a filmmaker, scriptwriter. But he's created the film with a production house which is very successful these days, a woman called Yulia Avina Bahara, who's head of a production house called Kawan Kawan Media. Yulia is actually one who had been a jury member for us at ReelOzInd a couple of years ago, one of these incredibly generous people who find the time. And so this film, Autobiography, it's set in the present day, and it's kind of the main character is a young man who works as a houseboy or a servant for a general, so a military general. Well, he's retired, but he's running for political office. And it's an allegory of like the Indonesian kind of political scene, but more, it's about, you know, Indonesia's history, about dealing with its history of human rights violations and corruption and, you know, abuses by the military through this relationship between this man and this boy who kind of, well, he's a young man who had been idolizing this fellow and then came to see him for what he was, you know, with this violent past and, you know, all of these things. It's a beautifully shot film. Interestingly, and this is kind of the way that these kinds of films are being made in Indonesia now, very international crew involved. So I have previously spoken with Yulia about this, and she, you know, she more and more she goes, she gets funding internationally, and then she includes crew from all over the world. So the DOP on this film is Polish. The editor of the film is from the Philippines. I think it might be shot. So the DOP is Polish. So you get this kind of this what you might think is an Indonesian aesthetic, but then increasingly it's a global kind of combination that's coming into Indonesian film. Really, really interesting times for Indonesian film, I think, as it develops that way. And, you know, it's a beautiful film to look at, very dark tones, and it resonates a lot, I think, with anyone who sees it and they, you know, recognize this character could be actually this real life person in Indonesian politics right now. I won't mention it, but yes. So, you know, those kinds of thought-provoking films are still, you know, being made, and they have to be made very carefully and, you know, with a lot of nuance in Indonesia still, to not get on the radar of certain senses and groups in community. So yeah, really great stuff happening. Indonesian films are, like, you know, still doing well at festivals around the world, and, you know, I think that's part of their secret, that they're kind of tapping into this, as I said, like quite international kind of, skill base, I think is the thing. But it's it's their stories, it's Indonesian storytelling, but it's being enhanced by all of that, you know, great knowledge that's coming in also from outside. So much more of that. So yeah, Autobiography is my pick. I'm not sure. It's probably on one of the streamers, you know, hopefully. And even maybe SBS will have it at some point.
Well, hopefully, because they have been screening some Indonesian films in the past, so that would be great. Well, that Autobiography sounds really interesting. I must make sure I catch up with it. And
you Google it. It's a great one, and I'm sure he's onto something big. I think actually, I saw that, you know, one of the big around the festivals, you would know more about this, where they're pitching and they're trying to get funding for films. Yes, I heard around that this director's next film is kind of the big thing that they've got shopping around at the moment. So we'll see what happens with that.
All right, we'll certainly watch out for that, and we will watch out for Real Oz Ind, which is happening at Acme October 19th at 6:30. And we've been speaking to the festival director of Real Oz Ind, Jemma Purdey. Jemma, as always, thanks for talking with me.
Thank you for having me, Peter, and see you on the 19th.
Absolutely, I'll be there. Bye-bye.